Welcome to Black Tea, and I'm your host, Bethia Carter, and I'm so delighted to be here. Our programs are grounded in Give Black Alliance's 5 T's: time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. And today's episode is an example of just that, connecting insight to action and aligning our resources and equipping our community to respond on time. This is Earth Month. And we invite you to come learn with us. You know, we think we often know what's going on, and then there's really what's going on in our community and what's happening. And also, what should we do? So today we're going to go to Memphis to learn about what happens in a community when the air itself is weaponized against you. What do you do? How can you live if you can't breathe? It's not just about AI. It's not just about development. It's about land, power, and Black communities. So this conversation we felt was not optional, but essential, because this is about each and every one of us. Let's go. In South Memphis, a historically Black community is now at the center of a multi-billion-dollar AI explosion built without public input, without environmental review, and without the community voice. Billions of dollars have been spent here. Only a small fraction of philanthropic dollars are directed towards justice here. So we have to ask, what's going on? And we are delighted to have two people here to help us understand exactly what's going on. Reverend Dr. Earle J. Fisher, Senior Pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Memphis and founder of Up the Vote 901, working at the intersection of faith, civic power, and Black liberation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And Ms. Amber Sherman, a nationally recognized political strategist, policy organizer, and Memphis native, focusing on shaping policy and advancing communities and solution. Hey, Miss Amber, thank you for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we're going to get started. I learned a lot about Boxwood, this historically Black town that was really at the epicenter of all of this. So, Amber, help us understand, or put into context for us, Memphis, this town, this historic treasure. Help us understand what's happening.
Yeah, so the data center that Elon Musk owns, XAI, he has multiple. The first one is called Colossus, and it was built in South Memphis and Boxtown, which is a neighborhood in Memphis, in South Memphis, that is historically Black and one of the oldest communities that was originally built using like different scraps and part of like Boxtown cars from trains. And so it's, a community that's used to experiencing like what it feels to be underrepresented and underserved. And so I feel like, and a lot of folks in Memphis feel like, Elon Musk really thought that this would be the path of least resistance to come and bring this data center. South Memphis, an area that already has a lot of air pollution. The children in the 38109 zip code, which is the zip code for South Memphis, has the highest amount of children who are missing school for asthma-related illnesses because the air quality is so bad. And I think that they just thought they could, bring it there and people really wouldn't make a big fuss about it. But our community has been heavily against it since it came. One of the main reasons is because they were using methane gas turbines. And those are turbines that use heavy chemicals like formaldehyde that they put into the air, nitrogen oxide and other things that cause other respiratory illnesses and increase the risk of respiratory illnesses. So that was one of the main things that we really have been fighting against, is getting them to remove those methane gas turbines, but also just the fact that we don't want a data center here at all. And we don't want that for the future of kids in South Memphis and in Memphis in general. Like, we don't want our air to be being polluted. And that's what's continuing to happen the longer they have these data centers here. And it's draining on our water because they're using the sand aquifer that we have in Memphis. And we have some of the best water in the world because of it. They're draining water from that because data centers need so much water to cool things off.
The picture you laid out was draconian, right? It's I can't even imagine. And Reverend, if you could help me understand this from a moral point of view and really help me understand moral faith, what is this doing to our community? How are we coping?
Well, I agree that it's draconian in the sense that it reminds us of those days where it was very blatant, the gentrification and the exploitation of Black communities. You think about when they started running interstate highways through Black communities and broke them up. Boxtown, in particular, has been a victim of environmental racism prior to the arrival of XAI. There are other spaces in Black communities in Memphis that have suffered from social determinants of health negatively because of the kinds of conditions from asthma to cancer. Places like the Depot, which was built on some toxins. And so it reminds us of that. From a moral standpoint, I think anytime you feel like people don't deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and that you can auction off their neighborhoods and their health on the altar of economic development, is a stark reminder of the legacy of racism and white supremacy structurally in the country. But moreover, even if we bought into some of the hyperbolic propositions from a place like XAI, saying that it would bring jobs and all of this investment, when you start peeling back the layers, you realize it is just on its face another venture capitalist project. So they promised, I think, a couple hundred jobs, maybe. That has not been accounted for up to this point. Not only that, there have been factories in Memphis that have shut down because of XAI, which is to say people have lost jobs. Now they are overly concerned about whether or not they'll be able to find a job equitable or equal to the one that they lost. There have been faith leaders who have rose up against this. I've written about it several times and been speaking out about it, and some other faith leaders have as well. But there are also some faith leaders who I think have fallen victim to the allure of a project like this and some of the mythical propositions that have been proposed by XAI. So it's sad, but it's par for the course when you start thinking about past as being prologue, because it has happened in so many communities across the country over the span of the last several centuries.
Well, this is really a conversation between the three of us, and it's not just a dialogue because we really want the audience to understand what's going on here. Here's the thing that I thought that was fascinating. We're here up north, so to speak. I've asked so many people about this. And I know it's been in Time Magazine. I know it's been in the Washington Post. I know that it was in NBC. I've asked so many people about this project. No one seems to know. What is getting in the way of us really getting this information out there? Because this is unbelievable and it's not going to stop. I feel like this is just the beginning. But how is it that this information is not known? What do you think, Amber? Or, I'm sorry, Reverend.
No, go ahead, Amber. You want to go?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that just the way that media works and like algorithms and stuff in general, like people see things at different times, which is why it's so important that we do have multiple podcasts we're going on, or like different people writing op-eds, like Pastor Earle said, or folks doing interviews, bringing it up in other like circles and sectors. Like I talk about XAI wherever I'm at, because most times people have heard of it but don't know the damage that it's caused in Memphis, or they've kind of heard something but they don't know what Memphians think about it. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to consistently talk about it over and over again to make sure you're reaching, the large, broad audience of people, because there are so many people who don't know exactly what's happening, but they do know that there's a wave of people hating data centers all across the country, right? Like everyone's getting these data centers popping up and everyone hates them. But it is important for them to know that, this is mostly in majority Black, poor neighborhoods where they're putting the data centers, and really show that trend and how it all ties back to the things that are happening in Memphis. Because Elon Musk, being within Trump's, administration in the beginning, gave him a lot of access to do the things that he's doing right now. And then after there was a lot of opposition to XAI, all of a sudden they want to bring in a task force full of federal agents and state troopers. And they say that it's to lower crime, but it's also to quell dissent because Elon Musk was tired of people being against him. We had appealed the air permit that they had been given. There has been continued dissent and folks pushing back against XAI since it got here. And so I think that they're also using every lever possible to try to stall that.
Reverend, what do you think?
It's not only Memphis, ironic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a majority white community right across the state line in South Haven that offered up a similar type of resistance. And so I think certain people haven't heard, to Amber's point, the media has just not done a good job of covering a lot of these issues. And I think some of this is somewhat serendipitous in the sense that early on, I think there was more media coverage about it because Musk was connected more directly to Trump at the time with Doge and all of that. When that started to dissipate, I think some of the interest in Musk projects started to dissipate in terms of national coverage and even some of the stuff from a local or regional standpoint. So you have those things. Above that, I think the dollar sign is what has caused so much pause. I mean, it's like $3.4 billion invested in the project if you calculate all that he's invested in the area. And so I think there are some people who are quiet about what is happening now, trying to wait to see if there's going to be a righteous return on the investment. But what I've been trying to say and what others have been trying to say is there is no righteous return on an investment if you are putting dollar signs and equating them to the value of Black folks' health and their quality of life. And so what we've been trying to push for, if indeed this project has to go forward, which I'm not saying it does have to, but the way that it's been structured and presented, I don't know if we have enough resistance within our political apparatus and infrastructure. And we definitely don't have enough political courage by some of our elected officials to find the most effective and efficient way to do this. At the very least, we were saying, make sure you maximize the environmental protections and make sure you maximize the economic investment for the local community. So there have been some things, some small, minute steps made in that direction. Amber mentioned the filings of the permits to try to make sure that they were following the proper environmental protocols. And we know that some of those have been violated, and even some of the tests that they say they ran on the side of the people who supported the project have came back to be found false. I think it's even Trump's Environmental Protection Agency like, nah, y'all got to do something better than this. You know, if Trump's EPA is saying this, you can just imagine how bad it is at its core. So you have those things working against the more righteous and accurate narrative of what's happening. And then a lot of people, unless it's happening to them directly, they don't seem to be interested. And the last thing I'll say about this is we know one thing to be true, and it's been shared in some public media spaces, because one of the people who was advocating for the project was simply asked, would you want to live by it? And they were like, no. So if the people who are advocating for the project don't even want to live by it, that should let us know exactly how dire the circumstances.
But I have to go back to the money part. Billions of dollars. And I think I read, if I'm correct, that they set aside $3 million for the community itself. Is that correct? Well, I don't know. A little.
So references to the community benefits agreement.
But when you look at that zip code, and I think I looked at it, and it was 16,000 homes there. And if you do the math, each home is receiving $190. It's not even $200.
It wouldn't be direct money to those homes. It will be investment into the community. So they have like a specific advisory board that's going to be talking about the projects the community wants from the tax revenue, but we don't know how much the tax revenue will be just yet.
But
if I could say right quick, in part, we don't know what the tax benefit will be,
right? Because
the way in which they are even assessing the property from a formal standpoint has been woefully inadequate, which is consistent with the way vulture capitalists hide some of their earnings and some of their money so that they don't get taxed for. The reason that there is even a community benefits agreement is because people on the ground have been pushing the mayor's administration to put something together to guarantee that there would be a direct investment in the community. And I want to say again, we are not saying that these are equal things. We're not saying that whatever you can invest any amount of money to compromise
That's right.
Health and livelihood of Black folks.
That's right.
However, from a business venture standpoint and a economic development standpoint, we know there have been scores of projects like this, and the immediate community has seen no economic benefit. In this instance, there is, I think, allocated a 25% kind of benefit. And I pushed and others pushed early on, just wondering where the number 25% came from. Because
that was going to be my next question. Where did that number come from? Where's the feasibility study for that?
Right. So according to the mayor's administration, they matched some number from some other agreement based upon some state statute. And we would have to just verify the facts in that, because at the end of the day, it's not worth the investment if we're only going to get crumbs back to Boxtown while people are suffering from health disparities at rates that's going to cost them way more money in health care than anybody would be able to see in their homes.
And that's where I wanted to go, because you don't know what that number may look like. You don't know what children are how it's going to impact their future lives at all. Here's another question. We're sitting here, we're Give Black Alliance, and I've got to ask this question. What is philanthropy doing? Where's philanthropy in this conversation? Where's philanthropy in its activation of advocacy or funding this movement? Do we have a collective silence?
No. I'm trying to yield to Amber because I said a lot in the last part. I definitely got something to say about it. Because, well, let me just say this since I'm talking already. The reality is people consider what Musk is doing to be philanthropic, which is part of the problem in and of itself. When you talk about Memphis and Shelby County, we have one of the highest rates of philanthropy in the country, but we also have one of the highest rates of poverty in the country. Because by and large, the way the philanthropic entities and organizations engage in their philanthropic action helps to manufacture and sustain the economic inequity. And so you didn't see philanthropists saying we need to make sure that there's a community benefits agreement. You saw some of the poorest activists, organizers, and faith leaders saying it. And so I don't have much expectation for philanthropy to try to hold philanthropy accountable. That's just like asking the police to hold themselves accountable. But it is important for us to log and document and press for philanthropy to do its part. But I just want to circle back around to where I started, and I yield to Amber. At the end of the day, the way most people interpret what is happening when a corporation like XAI comes and they don't receive a tax benefit, for instance. He gets XAI got no payment in lieu of taxes. They got no tax incremental financing, right? So this is money being paid, quote unquote, out of pocket by XAI, and people view that as philanthropic, but they don't see it on its face for what it really is, which is ultimately an equation of extraction from the community, much more than an investment within the community.
Amber?
Yeah, one I agree with Pastor Earle, and I will say the parts about, organizers and community advocating for the community benefits agreement is very true. I made a video explaining what community benefits agreements were, and the mayor actually commented under my video to say, yeah, he thought it was a good idea. And so then I pressed them on not only getting the ordinance together, because I knew they were going to do that, but making it 100%. I don't think the 25% number is good enough. And I said that from jump. And the mayor and his administration said that they felt like if they went for more than 25%, then it could be challenged because of all the DEI challenges. And 25% is what they would have been given basically if they did a pilot. So if they gave them, they did a payment in lieu of taxes, then 25% is what they would have been gotten forgiven technically. So the 25% would just go to the community instead. I can understand the rationale. I just still don't agree. I think that 100%, we're getting 100% pollution. We should get 100% of the taxes.
You should. But I got to go back to, it can't just be some of us pushing for this. It's got to be all of us. Philanthropy's role is not just to bring jobs. It's not just to make sure wealthy people have someplace to go. Its job is to ensure the social good of the people. That's the job. Now, it doesn't always
I don't
do
think
its
any of
job.
them are doing their job, but
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even though that's true, Sister Carter, I still think that that is a idealistic perspective on philanthropy.
it isn't idealistic, but we have to hold them. Those are our tax dollars that are not coming back to us. And we have to hold them accountable for this madness and bring them to the table because, for the most part, it's shame, right? That's our biggest tool with them is shame. For shame, how do you do this? Or how do we bring their bigger counterparts to the table? Again, talking to others, asking even other philanthropic organizations, what do you know about Memphis? Very little. And we have to blow that up. We have to make Memphis our next Ferguson. We have to figure, because if we don't, this is going to happen everywhere in all of our communities. So these are not, your problem is my problem. Your issue there, when I found out about this, and I have to thank Sean Prewitt for helping us understand the magnitude of this. I couldn't sleep because your problem is my problem. So, how do we move this together? What should we be
I was
doing?
going to say, I definitely agree. I want to say clearly, I agree with you, not only insofar as what your perspective is on what philanthropy ought to be, but also in the urgency of amplifying what is happening.
That's
in
right.
Memphis. And again, I think, we can thank people like State Representative Justin Pearson, for instance, because when some of this stuff first kicked off, he, Keyshawn, Tracy Adams, and others were on documentaries and other forms of communication to promote what this endeavor is all about. At the same time, so again, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And at the same time, when you start thinking about philanthropy historically, it is typically organizations that have gotten their funding from inequitable measures to begin with.
Absolutely.
And they typically only provide, they don't even give money out of their operating budget. They give money based upon their endowment, a percentage of something from profits from investment, which is part of the economic struggle and challenge to begin with. I am not saying that they should not pay their fair share. They absolutely should. And I am saying historically, they have not paid their fair share.
That's
not even
right.
paid a fraction of the fair share. And it's going to require not only philanthropy, but for us, I think first and foremost, the public entity, the governmental agencies and entities have to do their part, because part of the reason philanthropy is able to get away with inequitable practices is because they are able to leverage some of the laws and the policies that are in place. And so we have to do both of those things in terms of holding philanthropy accountable, absolutely, insofar as how they reinvest their money, regardless of how they get it, I guess you could say. But also at the same time, making sure that government is doing its part to not make it so easy for philanthropy and economic developers to come in and exploit communities like Boxtown and cities like Memphis.
It's funny that you say that, but the people make up the government, right? All government's local. And when I was looking into this issue, and just recently realized that the current White House administration, March 30th, I think it is, issued a proclamation, that's what we'll call it, because that's what they do, that they want no state restraint on what they do. No state restraint. That's unheard of. That's unconscionable. That's unbelievable. So I'm trying to figure out, how do we build our own underground movement here? How do we build a movement of us that we not only inform people of what's going on, but how do we use this as really giving more firepower? What should we be looking at in Memphis to support? And with that, I want to welcome Ms. Turner. Thank you for joining us. How are you? I don't know if your mic is working, but we'll come back to you. But I do want to stay in this vein of we can see that they are trying to make this harder. How do you build 35 turbines and you got to fly over to see them and then go straight over to, what is it, South Haven, and now there's 41. This is a strategy. What are we doing to help? What are we doing funding? Who are we talking to?
Yeah, I know the beginning part of your question was about like building like an underground movement and some other stuff. I don't think that's necessary. I think we have been organizing out loud for quite a while. I think that that's why they're, pushing their own narrative of what Memphis wants, because they see how, the organizing we're doing is working and people don't support the data centers. There's a huge movement against them. And I think that the movement should be above ground, loud, seen, and they should be able to feel that pressure consistently. I'll also say that them having all these different data centers and moving things around like they did in South Haven. There's a data center in Whitehaven.
Mm-hmm.
They just bought a fourth building, but there's only one data center that's working because they cannot power all of these data centers. And one thing about billionaires and greed is that they don't care about the fact that the things that they want to do won't work logistically or realistically, just can't happen. And so now him and this Elon Musk and this push, have all these data centers here to expand in this way has only hurt him. He said to sell XAI off to SpaceX because he hasn't made any money from it. He isn't able to power the other two data centers. He only has Colossus 1. They had to buy the land in South Haven to get all those turbines to possibly power the one in Whitehaven. We still don't know what that's looking like yet because they still haven't been able to power it. So I think that our organizing has worked up until this point. Even in the legal challenges, we haven't necessarily won because they're still arguing them, of course. Or with the permit appeal, we didn't win the appeal, but we did put a lot of notoriety on the issue. And that really, made the air permit board even say, well, we should go back and set some regulations on these things. Even though they didn't agree with the appeal for the permit, they didn't agree to that, but they did agree that some of these things actually do need to be regulated and we do need to go back and make some changes. So I do think that we've still seen progress even when it wasn't the exact progress we want.
And it's quite possible that part of the reason they just put on hold building the facility that was supposed to replace the water that is being taken right now from the aquifer is because their economic portfolio is not reading like they thought it would be. At the same time, so there's that, and Amber is right. Like there's been a lot of organizing out loud that not only needs to be applauded, but also needs to be invested in fully and amplified.
Right.
Because the work that we are doing is being done on shoestring budgets with people sacrificing a whole lot of their time, talent, treasure, and the other T's that y'all have in y'all's in y'all's framework. So what it looks like to me is not constantly, because a lot of philanthropists repeat this cycle, and
right.
can attest to this. In Memphis, what they do is have 15 organizations competing for the same pot, and then getting those organizations to ultimately end up competing against each other in ways that all of them only get crumbs. And then half of the mission of the organization is compromised because they're shape-shifting, trying to maintain the access to crumbs that they get. So, yeah, no, it should not. Maybe in terms of philanthropy, there are certain parts of the movement that should be funded out loud, and it shouldn't be underground. In terms of the clandestinity of strategizing, that happens underground. It's going to continue to happen underground. And yes, it needs some sufficient funding as well. But if we want to stop these types of things from happening, there have to be more courageous investors who unapologetically say, this is the type of work that we want to fund, and we want to fund it fully. But even when we seen in 2020 white economic anxiety at all time high,
Mm-hmm.
and they were throwing money everywhere and
Right.
everybody at the same time. A, it still was not enough money.
Right.
And B, they were just waiting until the tide turned and the volume was low enough for them to go back to business as usual. And here we are.
So, with that, we are here. Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? And what does it take?
We don't want any more data centers.
How do we dismantle this?
So that was actually what I was just describing at the end. So if there are alliances that are out there that are going to invest in
Right.
this type of work, then I'm saying there should be a full-throated investment in the places where you see these types of things happen, and in the people, the institutions, and the organizations that are working against them. I think it is as simple as that.
I think it is that simple. And I think we need to know exactly where that money should go, and not, how can I say, from a sort of anecdotal point of view. But one of the things that we want to do, even to us, we want to come down. We want to figure out, how do we, to your point, do our part in bringing in this full, whether it is just our time, our treasure, how do we bring forth a better spotlight on this? Because this cannot stand. But as you think about the future and where Boxwood could be, and I'm sorry, I am so Boxtown. I am so sorry. Where Boxtown could be, and what other economic engines are there? What could be brought there? What could we imagine there?
I mean, I think that community is already doing the work of what they want.
Can you share with us what's there?
Yeah, I mean, so South Memphis and Boxtown specifically is surrounded by industrial plants. And MCAP, or Memphis Communities Against Pollution, and Young Gifted and Green, both Black-led orgs, have been working to close those different toxic waste facilities down for several years, and they've actually succeeded in closing two. So they are, doing a great organizing job. It's a long-term thing, though. Like it is, you can't just get all these industries and plants to close overnight, but they have continued to advocate for the community,
Right.
to hold them accountable around the polluting they're doing,
Right.
and to push them to be closed. And several of them have closed, which is a big issue, a big deal. And then also there has to be development. So once those places leave,
what's coming in next?
Yeah, recruiting businesses that are what the community actually wants, and not more heavy industrial warehouse type of jobs.
And what are those businesses, or what is it that the community is asking for? And I understand we don't want those, but what else could come in? Where what other investments?
I don't want to yield to the notion that what is required is for something else to come in, as if there aren't already industries from hospital,
there we go,
education, especially arts and entertainment. I mean, I think the whole
Thank
world
you.
right now is benefiting from the art and entertainment culture of Memphis. And so when you start talking about where investments can be made, it's in those already those pre-existing institutions and organizations. I mean, I work at when there's an HBCU in Memphis, that's where money should be going. No question, right? The school systems is a place where money should be going, especially the neighborhood schools. Some of the political organizing initiatives, because part of why this stuff happens the way it does in Memphis is because Memphis is in the state of Tennessee that has a white nationalist Congress that is making sure that Memphis is always served up on a platter of economic exploitation. And you can't break the back of the supermajority in Nashville without adequate and robust political organizing happening in Memphis and across the state. That's where some funds should be sent. I mean, there are a lot of places that are already ripe for those type of investments. I don't think it requires us bringing any other entity or any other industry into the city, but it does require a reconfiguring and a reimagination of what the workforce in Memphis and Shelby County should look like. I'll say lastly, I got to switch over to my phone. I'll say lastly, the psychology of investors is that the workforce in Memphis is a cheap labor force.
Oh.
And so when you see something like XAI come, it is under the auspices that the cheap labor force can be exploited locally, while you bring in from outside those people who you think are smart enough in tech and science and engineering and mathematics. You bring them in and you pay them the big dollars, and then you give the people here in the city these minuscule jobs and the meager wages. And so we have to break that psychology too, because if indeed Memphis is supposed to be at the forefront of innovation because it's logistics power, then I think we need to make sure that the school system and the college communities are producing people with enough consciousness and enough character to be able to fill those jobs and keep the money in the city and in the county.
I know you have to switch to your phone, so I'm going to go to Amber and ask you. So I feel like the Reverend has said a lot, and it's not just in Memphis, but these are many of our communities, whether it's Cleveland, Ohio, whether it's Boston, whether it is Detroit. We keep looking outside and trying to figure out where do we go. So if you could highlight for us several organizations that you would say right now that we should be investing in, what would they be?
I mean, I think the main ones are, the ones that are doing really good environmental justice work in Memphis right now, which is Young, Gifted, and Green.
We also have Tell us about Young, Gifted, and Green.
They're an org that really advocates around lead and lead prevention, and also, pollution, air pollution. And right now with this huge rush of data centers, also advocating against that. They have a youth council that's very active, that lobbies statewide and federally around legislation that really addresses environmental justice issues. And then I will also say Memphis Communities Against Pollution. It started as Memphis Communities Against the Pipeline when there was a pipeline slated to be built in Memphis called the Byhalia Pipeline that would have ran through South Memphis, which, like I said earlier, is a poor Black neighborhood in Memphis. Instead of just going through another part of the city, actually Germantown, which is a majority white suburb, which would have taken 50 miles off of the pipeline. But they were choosing to go around that community and run it through a poor Black community because they felt like we weren't going to fight it. We weren't going to push on the issue, and they knew that then white people wouldn't want us to have a pipeline going, through their community. But they don't care about us and our quality of life and the quality of our water. So we were able to defeat that pipeline, and then it became Memphis Communities Against Pollution. They've been advocating against pollution, heavy industrial pollution, and also XAI. And then there's also different youth groups who've been organizing. Tigers Against Pollution, which is students at the University of Memphis, has been organizing heavily against XAI, and really just talking about, the impact of them as youth, having to breathe this polluted air and wanting to live in Memphis after they graduate and work here, and they love the community here, but they don't want to be poisoned.
Right.
So Rose Students Against Pollution, which is also students at Rose College who are advocating against the data centers being built here and working with other student organizers to do different events and stuff, which has been really great at really galvanizing younger groups in the movement around this kind of environmental justice issue. Because I think the younger you start, the more likely you are to succeed, right? So they've already started working on this issue. They already have had a lot of success, actually. I mean, we're seeing that and the impact of it by how Elon Musk is pushing back and trying to, really reshape the narrative. So I think we have a lot of really great orgs in this right now.
I do too. And, I do think it's important that we name them. I think we name them, we get their information and we get it out to our people, and we try to fund this as well. The Reverend mentioned education, and there's been a lot going on here in Memphis with education. So when this thing was proposed, what was proposed for the children? Or for education? Where's that education pipe?
Proposed.
Nothing. Not a thing. That's unbelievable.
No, it's not.
It is
It's really
unbelievable.
not. It's not unbelievable if that's how they do things. I mean, they have never considered the children before. The American Association for Asthma has said that we have an F grade for air for the
That's
last
right.
15 plus years.
So
They have never cared.
where is political or the mayor, you have state reps, where are they on this issue? How
A lot of
how
them support it.
I'm
A
sorry?
lot of them support the data center. They support the economic engine that is creating our Chamber of Commerce, who really guided XAI coming to Memphis. They helped them come here. They helped them find buildings to buy. They were private property, so they didn't have to go through the city and have to get approval. And they really spearheaded the entire thing and are calling this the building of the digital delta. That's what they're calling it. With this data center and the other ones, and then also recruiting more data centers here, even though we as a community have said we don't want it, because the Chamber of Commerce doesn't care about it. They don't care about what we think and what we want. They care about the bottom dollar for them.
Well, this is what I'm going to say. We care. And we are going to do our part. I promise you, I promise the Reverend, we are going to do our part to not only amplify this story, but to ensure that we talk to philanthropy, to ensure that we talk to all of our powers, because this is like, I don't know, this just kind of came to my heart. This is like, you're my cousin. And this is happening at my cousin's house. I can't sleep if my cousin can't sleep. And Amber, I really want to commend you for the work that you're doing. I commend the Reverend for the work that he's doing. But the fact that you two, and particularly you, are not just fighting, looking at this as in what's happening today, but how this is going to impact our tomorrow and generations to come. And I want to commend you for this work and say thank you so much. Thank you for being here and sharing with us information that I would say most of us were not aware of. And now I think what the other thing I'm going to say, if you could look at this 15 years from now, and I know you have us, we're closing our show. Tell me about Boxtown 15 years from now.
I mean, I would hope to see a more thriving community. I think that one, I would hope that the data centers were gone, but
They
also
will be.
that
You're going to make that happen.
yeah, the data centers are gone, and also like the community is thriving, and they weren't, completely depleted from the pollution, the hazards coming from this data center. They just has had disregard for our community.
Well, you know what? They can have disregard, but we're more powerful than they are. And we're seeing that through your work. And we already know the power is not only in our hands, but we are going to do more, and we're going to join you in this fight. You've given us so many things that we can do this month in funding programs, and also told us what accountability looks like. And I thank you. So what would be your last words that you would like to share with us today?
I would just say to, stay locked in on the data center movement and what's happening, because the same way the data centers came here, they can come to where you are, and it's important to be prepared to push back.
I agree. Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much. And please give my regards to the Reverend and thank him on our behalf as well.
Thank you.
For our friends that are still with us, this has been an eye-opening conversation. She's right. Memphis is not alone. This can happen anywhere. Memphis is not an exception. It's really a signal on the future and what we need to do to stay vigilant on our communities, on our brothers and sisters everywhere. If it's not here in the United States, it can go to the Caribbean. If it's not in the Caribbean, it can go to Africa. We have to stay vigilant on how to protect our people and how to emancipate ourselves, because we can't wait for other people to do it. And I'm so happy for the work that others are doing to not just sit back and take this action, but actually emancipate themselves, because the time is here. And as we think about our work going forward, we want to make sure that we are all serious about this business. all serious about what we're hearing and find your part and what you can do to make this better. If this episode resonated with you and you want to reach out and do more, reach out to us. You can find us online at giveblackalliance.org. If you want to share your treasure, please consider doing so. And we'll have a list of organizations that you can share your treasure with, even in Memphis. But it's important for us to think about the time we have and what we're doing with our time, the talents that we have, and how do we share these talents with our neighbors? How are we sharing our treasures, our ties? Who is talking about this issue? And how do we testify? How do we make sure that everyone knows what's happening in our backyard? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Black Tea.